Hey guys, welcome to another video. Before I start this story time, I just want to take a minute to make something clear. I think that there is this misconception that I'm sharing these stories in real time, which is giving the impression that I get spanked a lot. And that's just simply not the case. I share these stories on a consistent schedule because that's how having a podcast and having a platform like YouTube works, that if I don't consistently upload content, then the algorithm gets very unhappy and our channel would suffer. So I have to kind of maintain a schedule, which is why I am uploading these stories on a consistent basis, but I'm really pulling stories from the last 5 years of my relationship. And so the frequency of me telling these stories is not indicative of the frequency that I am actually receiving discipline. And when I talk about how discipline affects me and how it, brings connection into my relationship and the emotional process that I go through as a take it in hand, I'm doing that to give you guys a picture of what having this type of relationship means to me, because I think sometimes part of the reason why people listen to this content and seek out these types of videos is to kind of get a perspective of why would somebody want this? Like, why would someone who is receiving discipline want to be in this relationship structure? What do they get out of it? And so that's the only reason I share, the relationship building aspect of going through discipline and the emotional process that I go through as a taken in hand. That's why I share that, is to give some insight of why would anybody even want to be in this relationship structure when you're the one receiving the discipline. And when I talk about that, the connection and the emotional process, I'm not romanticizing discipline and I'm not fetishizing discipline. And so it's not that I enjoy going through the process, but there is a benefit to my relationship. There's a benefit to my personal growth. And I think that it would be disingenuous not to include those aspects when I'm telling these stories. So I've gotten a few comments on those things, so I just wanted to clear that up. So with all that said, let's get into this story time. So in this story time, I'm going to talk about a spanking I received years ago. And it's something that I didn't agree with. Now, I'm going to tell the story how it happened back then, but if this same scenario were to happen in my relationship today, it would be a totally different outcome because I have grown a lot, but I'll talk through that too, because I think that it's good to say hey, this is what happened, but if it were to happen now, this is how I would approach it. So in our early dynamic, one of the things that we really wanted to work on, and when I say we, the way we approached building rules back then was very, very collaborative. And so Coda really did rely on me to come to him and say, hey, I want to work on this. Can we set up structures around it? And that's how we built our rules for a long time. And so I had come to Coda and I had asked him to help me stay on track with some diet goals that I was having. And so I am the type of person that I will absolutely overindulge on sweets. And so I asked him, I was like, what, it was around Easter time, and one of my favorite candies of the entire year comes out only at Easter. And so I told him, I was like, I really want your help to be moderate in my consumption of these. And so we had some expectations set up around when I could have them, how many I could have, all of those things. And it was all very, very agreed upon. And So there was one day that I was cooking dinner and I just really was getting a little peckish. I just wanted a little snack. And the bag of candy was sitting right there and I was like, oh, I really want these, but he's not home from work, so I can't ask him. And so I counted out just a single serving and I was like, I'm just gonna have what I would have later. I'll just have that now and it won't be a big deal. Well, he decided that it was a big deal because I didn't ask first. And I got so upset because I didn't overindulge, right? And looking back on it, I would have a very different reaction now. Now I would understand where I went wrong, but at the time I didn't understand where I went wrong and I got very upset and I got very defensive and I did not agree with the fact that he wanted to punish me over this. Now I have, and this has actually happened recently where something happened and I didn't necessarily agree that, the rule should still be a rule, but it was a rule. And so I took my punishment and then asked him afterwards if we could talk about maybe restructuring that rule. And that's what I should have done here. I should have realized that I was in the wrong because at the time that I made the decision to go ahead and indulge in a little treat, I knew that the expectation was that I would ask permission first. And so given that, I should have just taken my spanking. I should have just taken the punishment and then asked if we could change the parameters around that rule. But that's not what happened. I was so offended. I was so taken back because I didn't overindulge. I didn't, completely go off the rails. I just didn't ask first, and I thought that would be okay because he wasn't available, right? These are all the rationalizations that were happening in my mind, and I realize now that doesn't matter, right? So that's where I've grown, is understanding that the rules and structures are black and white. They are there for a reason, and you can't go against them no matter what rationalization you happen to have at the time. And so he decided that I was going to get a spanking for not following the rule of asking. And so that night I was hot. I was so angry that he was going to follow through with spanking me for this when I didn't do anything wrong in my own mind. Of course I did something wrong. That's why he was justified in punishing me for it. And so I complied with the spanking. I did, he told me why I was being spanked. I think I can't remember. Honestly, I can't remember if I argued with him in that moment, if I tried to negotiate with him in that moment. But I do remember when he told me that I was getting a spanking, I remember being very upset, very pouty. And I think I may have tried negotiating before the spanking to tell him, and he was just shutting it down. He was like, you were supposed to ask. That doesn't matter. Just kind of just shutting it down. So it came time, he had me get in position, but I was I was still so irritated. I was not in the right headspace to accept a punishment. I was not in the right headspace to accept that I was wrong. And I don't know if he picked up on that at all because, again, this was super early. But I think that now, if he could tell that I was being really resistant to the punishment, if he could tell that I was in a bad headspace, there would definitely be some corner time, some lecture, maybe having me write out an apology. He would work with me to get me into the right headspace now because he's really big on that part. He really wants me to accept the fact that I'm getting a spanking. And honestly, it's not that big of an issue for me now because I understand where those lines are and where those boundaries are because they are more concrete. But at the time, I was so, like, I just remember getting in position and just being, like, frustrated. And so he started the spanking. You know, he gave me, oh gosh, I want to say he probably gave me like 20 swats with the paddle. It wasn't a long spanking. It definitely wasn't a very hard spanking, but it was enough for me just to, like, again, just feel so angry. I don't know what else to say. Like, I just was like so irritated and so like and then I think by the time he was done, because yes, that paddle wasn't very effective. Yes, the spanking wasn't very long. So, but it was long enough for me to start to feel a little bit of a sting from the paddle, right? And so he, you know, gave me the paddle strokes, and that paddle was big enough that there was really only one spot it could land, so it just was kind of landing in the same spot over and over again, which definitely makes it stingier and helps build the sensation. So by the time he was done, you know, my bottom was stinging a little bit, and I feel like I had moved on from being angry to being so hurt. Not physically hurt, emotionally hurt. Like, I was just so sad that he would not understand why I did what I did, and that he would hold it against me, and that he would, you know, follow through with punishing me when I, you know, again, I didn't do anything wrong. I laugh at myself now because I can look back at the situation and be like, you had no, like, you were absolutely wrong. You went against the rules. You knew what the consequence was going to be, and he followed through with it. And then you got angry and defensive, and then you got emotionally upset and hurt. Like, I laugh at myself because why? Why did I do that? And then I wonder why Coda had a hard time holding me accountable, and why he had a hard time developing his confidence as a head of household when I came to him and I was like, I want this. And then when he actually follows through and does the thing, I push back to the point where he is questioning all of his decisions as a head of household. And then I wonder why we had such a long growing process, and why our growth was so slow, and why, you know, we took so many, you know, wrong turns along the way. No wonder, right? Gosh, I actually talking through that right now, I just kind of came to those conclusions, and now I feel even worse that I did that. Like, you know, so all that to say, I talked to him about it the next day, and I was just like, look, it makes me really sad that you would think that I would intentionally go against you. Again, I did intentionally go against him. So I'm actually getting upset at myself now, because I'm like, you know, I was being so silly, and I was undermining him so much, and I was being so destructive to our early relationship, or our early domestic discipline relationship. And now I'm just like, oh, I'm so glad that we were able to move past that. And I'm so glad that we have come to where we are now, because gosh, that could have completely derailed us. Me pushing back like that, and me being that resistant to something that I said I wanted, it could have completely derailed us. So I think that, to Coda's credit, in that situation, he did hold fast to the rule. He's like, look, I understand why you're upset, but this was the rule, and this was the consequence, and that's why I followed through with it. And then we talked about what to do if he's not available. And I think that really did. What was good about the situation is that it taught us some communication skills that we didn't have before. And it really taught me how to understand where those boundaries are and what those boundaries mean. And you would think, like, obviously, if it's a rule, it's a rule. I don't know why I didn't see it that way back then. I definitely see that now. I definitely understand that now. And looking back at my past self, I'm really kind of upset with myself for undermining my head of household and being so defensive and so causing such dissension in the growth of our relationship. So definitely that was an experience, and it was a learning experience because that was the first spanking that I received that I didn't agree with. And again, I see how my resistance in that moment created a lot of problems for us in the next few years of our dynamic before we were able to really figure things out, and Coda was really able to gain a lot of confidence as a head of household. And so it's just one of those things that learn from my mistake. Like, if you're in your early days, don't do that. Like, if your head of household decides that you need to be punished and it's something that's been agreed upon, it's been negotiated, and you kind of, you can look at it and say, okay, I did something that I wasn't supposed to do. Even if I didn't think it was a big deal, it is technically a rule. Just accept your punishment. Don't do what I did. I think it's human nature to want to defend yourself. Nobody wants to be wrong. And when we're in these relationship dynamics, when we are the taken in hand, we get told that we're wrong. And that's just kind of part of the deal, right? Because if we were never wrong, we wouldn't need to be in this relationship dynamic. We wouldn't. And for the vast majority of us that brought this to our head of household, we would have never brought the concept to our head of household if we thought that we were right. And so when we get told we're wrong and we know we're wrong, we need to just accept that and not get defensive, because again, that's so detrimental to the growth of your relationship. So learn from me. Hope you enjoyed the story time. I hope it was entertaining. Hopefully you can take something away from this and let me know what you think. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.